Before I start, I must say that this is merely a series of ideas I've had for a Team Fortress 2 sequel that have been rolling around in my head for some time now, and I have absolutely no programming experience nor technical knowledge whatsoever in game design, so I wouldn't have the slightest clue on how to create this whatsoever, but I'm just putting out these ideas to get them off my chest and as a suggestion for someone who could possibly bring them to life. Team Fortress 2 is the greatest multiplayer game ever made, and it is in a three-way tie as my favorite game of all time, now four-way, and I've literally been playing it since its release in 2007. I played it for 4 years straight on the 360 with no updates at all, which proved just how enduring it was, and ever since 2012 I've basically been playing the PC version since. Not getting on every day, but at least once or sometimes more a month, and this has been going on for 12, coming up on 13 years. When so many game series have risen and fallen over the last decade and a quarter, Team Fortress 2 is still chugging along, getting major updates as recently as October 2017, over 10 years after its release. And yet it still tops the most played charts on Steam, and no matter how annoyed I get with it after playing for all night, I still find myself yearning to come back to it, inevitably, and sometimes even the next day. However, nothing can last forever, and even though it's been steadily played for 12 years, it's been steadily losing players, as any game will, which is why the updates have slowly been declining, and it's been 2 years, minus cosmetics given out around certain holidays, which is mostly community made since a major Valve update. There is also the claim that most of the players in-game nowadays are mostly making money off of the trading mechanic, and the number of actual playing players is much lower in comparison. I can attest to this somewhat, as most of the community servers are basically empty, minus a few ones, but the game came out in 2007, so a lot of people have obviously moved on looking for newer content. Let's face reality, Team Fortress 2 will never remotely get back to its glory days, even if by a miracle Valve starts giving a shit about a game they only really pay attention to anymore, because it still makes them money, because there's only so much you can do with a game engine from 2007, and it seems it's already been stretched to its capacity. There are certain major flaws with the design of TF2, which I've only really learned about recently, such as the melee system, which uses the collision detection box instead of the hitbox, which is why you can be hit from 10 feet away, sometimes seemingly, and the particle system, which no amount of processing power due to how it works will ever make the game run smoothly unless you turn off the particles in your settings. Shit's old, son! And the only way to make it run better, or in order to fix any of the programming mishaps buried super deep in the engine, is to literally make a new one with all of the old assets, and at that point you might as well create a sequel already, as it would be much easier, and you can always do what you wanted to do, with the classes changing and improving them, and other mechanics like maps, and whatever else you can think of, with the bonus being you get people more interested with a full-on new game. So, here's my idea for Team Fortress 3. Or as I like to call it, Team Fortress 3 Neon. First off, it will absolutely be a class-based shooter, obviously, which will be very similar to TF2 in a lot of mechanics, with some minor differences tweaking the classes, which will remain the same 9 classes from Team Fortress, which will operate nearly identical to their TF2 counterparts. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. However, all 9 of the classes will have new loadouts accompanying their standard loadouts, much like what Valve intended with Team Fortress 2 originally before they started updating, which will change what each class does and their role on the battlefield. Think like the Huntsman Sniper or the Demo Knight, with each class drastically changing with certain equipment choices. I've also come up with a new feature for the game, changing things up still, giving each class a bonus ability, which I've dubbed Augments, as I couldn't think of a better name, and most of the names for items and powers I've come up with is just sort of placeholder names anyway. But these augments will be in like a 4th weapon slot, which can only be accessed through a button press and not in the inventory scroll. They are basically there to compensate for what certain classes are lacking, and to allow greater diversity in changing what the class actually does. Think of them as little powers each class has that could be passive abilities or more active ones. However, they are not ultimates like in Overwatch, more like little buffs or movement bonuses to change things up. It will become clearer once I explain each class and their augments. And speaking of which, I'm going to briefly go into major updates and changes to the game all around, followed up by touching upon the story, then moving along to the classes, their character, weapons, augments, and changes starting off with their standard loadouts, then their secondary. Game changes. 1. No random crits. At all. Unless it's at the end of the round. Once one team has won the game, that's just tradition. And great fun. 2. No random damage spread any longer. Your bullets, melee swings, fire, bombs, whatever else will do the same damage the same distance every goddamn time. 3. No bullet spread. Your bullets will go in exactly the same place every single time, perfect accuracy, just like in the competitive version of Team Fortress 2. It may not be as big as the other two, but if you miss this time, it will be entirely your fault, and not some arbitrary tomfoolery in a vain attempt to make things balanced by adding some random element. So no random nonsense to your damage or weapons, so now you just need to learn how to aim, and you'll be set! 4. No longer will your melee hits clip onto teammates, making a 1-on-2 situation favor the one like in TF2. And it will actually use the player's hitbox instead of collision detection to register the hit. So no more 10-foot long bone saws smacking you around the corner. 5. A full tutorial for all weapons, augments, and loadouts, as well as video tutorials and written tutorials, with visual aids accessible from the main menu and each weapon's description. Basically, think of it like the Danger Room or whatever it's called in X-Men, where the map can change depending on what you need it to be, which I was imagining it being a big indoor grid thingy with large squares that could come in and out from the floor, ceiling, and walls, as well as being able to teleport in whatever may be necessary for what the tutorial required. You could have like robots to beat up on based off of the other mercenaries and special targets, as well as lockers that could spawn in and out, allowing you to change up your loadout. So a giant ass training room that can change on the fly, that will be updated to teach you how to use this crap, instead of leaving you guessing based on some description blurb or looking it up online. Or if you're too lazy for the training, you can just watch videos you can access in-game or visit a well-organized file system that goes into more detail what the weapons, powers, and each loadout does, as well as giving more description and backstory on each individual thing with accompanied pictures which you can search through like weapons, augments, loadouts, classes, like in an actual filing cabinet, or just type it into like a search bar. And there will be a shortcut to all three of these methods of tutorial in your backpack for each item. And this also could be done with miscellaneous items, like having the wiki info in the filing cabinet thing too. 6. Useful information that is not displayed in Team Fortress 2, such as a breath meter when underwater, or damage resistances or weaknesses, will be displayed on the player's screen. Basically, when you have certain weapons that give you a health bonus, or like a shield effect, or make you vulnerable to certain damage, it will be displayed on screen to remind you, perhaps near the health bar, as well as in the main loadout screen. Maybe in a text box under the actual player model, it'll show all of your status effects due to your weapons selection. Also, when damage numbers pop up, maybe a shield or similar icon will be displayed to show enemy players you have some damage resistances on, and in turn, if you're doing extra damage due to a negative effect of a weapon, maybe like a skull and crossbones will show up next to their damage numbers, or a plus sign to notify you while you're doing extra damage. 7. Revamp the cosmetic system to where it's body part based, with of course still having limits on how much you could put on, but now you won't be limited by wearing too much items on your head or torso, meaning for some reason you couldn't wear cosmetic items like pants. Another great idea to go along with this new cosmetic system would be to make an ability to make individual pixels invisible, meaning that any part of the model could become invisible, removing annoying clipping and awkward situations where certain cosmetics basically are just made extra large to go over certain body parts like heads. This would create cosmetics unlike anything seen before in Team Fortress, and would go great with the new Gib system. Think about it. Hyper-realistic gibbing. Gibs made in real time, based on where the player is hit, and you could have multiple modeled parts to have true decapitation, and body parts severed, like being cut in half. Long ways. More on that later, but this would definitely go great with the era that this game is set in, and the over-the-top violence aesthetic of Team Fortress in general. You could also use the Pixel Invisible tool to add in internal diagrams to give some truly gory gibs, but would still have the cartoony aesthetic of Team Fortress 2. This could of course be turned off if you don't have the PC to render it, as well as other features I'll go into shortly. One more idea on this is a skin system, which will be like a fourth cosmetic slot, or however many there'll be, that'll change the default look of the model itself, much like traditional skins in other games like Fortnite and Overwatch, that your cosmetics will go over. Think of it like the Voodoo Curse cosmetic, or in certain servers you can turn yourself into a robot. These will change the default look, but not too much of course, like the mercenaries' outfits, hairstyles, and whatever else you're wearing, as well as special ones like Scream Fortress, changing their actual skin, eyes, and whatever else. 8. Automatic settings for all levels of users, from low to high end. Like it'll have permanent saved defaults you can switch to if you're not like an expert when it comes to settings, so you don't have to futz around trying to figure things out. Obviously, there will be one for maximum settings, then one for slightly lower than the middle range, and then lower than this, and then super low settings where basically nearly everything is turned off, like particle effects and other unneeded processes that will slow down older PCs. I even thought of a mode called Neon Mode, which will literally use wireframe models for everything, and has minimal information as possible for really old computers. There most likely will be more default settings to easily switch between, but there should be definitely a way for the game to analyze your PC to give you the best settings and display it as like best optional settings to make it all that much more simplified to maximize your experience. 9. Absolutely a separate audio channel for voice chat that's default louder than everything else, for God's sakes. I know that's probably obviously going to be standard for games nowadays, but damn, is it annoying how loud everything is on Team Fortress 2, and I'm absolutely going to make this no longer an issue in Neon. 10. No. More. Ranked. Matchmaking. Okay, technically yes, but it will be the second option, as main matchmaking will be sent back to before Meet Your Match screwed it all up on Team Fortress 2, making it casual or free-for-all, no level-based matchmaking whatsoever. You know, like the good old days. And for the weirdos who like ranked or level-based matchmaking, it'll still be there as the second option to casual, but it'll be tweaked, where if you can't find players of your level, it'll search for higher or lower leveled players to fill in the match, making it somewhat bearable, and you may actually get to play in a full game. And as for actual ranking, with it putting you on an actual scoreboard, the hell with that, as who honestly gives a damn? It gets filled up with hackers and glitchers pretty quick anyway, so I don't really see a point, and this will go great with the next suggestion. 11. Fuck competitive. They will never be competitive unless an outside force modifies the game itself to do their own thing, as I'm not ruining this game for the 99% so a few dozen players can play in a damn tournament. Look what happened to Overwatch when they tried forcing competitive, and this is just not what Team Fortress 2 or Team Fortress in general has ever been about to begin with. It should always stay casual and about fun and enjoyment, as this is what the vast majority of players are here for, so why ruin it for everyone else just to pander to the few so you can become an e-sport? Well, that's all I've got for the major changes and can think of now, but I'm definitely open for suggestions. But now on to the main event, going through the story, its characters, their weapons, augments, and personalities. In the year 1987, it's springtime at Manco headquarters, under the management of its new CEO, Miss Pauline, and its co-owner, her husband, Jeremy, the Team Fortress 2 scout, as the corporation is in crisis. A new diabolical corporation by the name of Olivia Corps is slowly beginning to dominate the world secretly, and majorly cut into Manco's business of everything diabolical. This up-and-coming evil corporation is led none other than by Olivia Mann, daughter of the late and not-so-great Gray Man, with her now being a sexy evil businesswoman hell-bent on following in her father's footsteps of world domination through the discovery of a new and mysterious element simply called neon. That's right. This Team Fortress 2 is set in and heavily inspired by the 1980s and eventually the 1990s. Whereas Team Fortress 2 is based heavily off of spy fiction of the 1960s, Team Fortress Neon is heavily based off of 1980s culture in general, which will be shown through the mercenaries, the story, and its general style, hence why it's called Team Fortress Neon. That and based off the gas, of course, which is this game's version of Australium, being its main MacGuffin driving the story, as well as a tribute to Transformers Cybertonium, as yet again another 80s reference. Also, neon was basically everywhere in the 80s, which will have a deeper meaning for the next couple decades, which I'll explain now. Back to the story. This next part I've written out like a brief story skit, and since I have no narration skills, I'm just going to show it has text on screen, with me immediately heading towards the synopsis, so just pause to read. The most cliched 80s story ever. An evil corporation hell-bent on global domination, but with a boss babe at the helm who's rotten to the core. The basic theme of the story, however, is that the cultural, technological, and entertainment booms of the 80s and 90s were caused by the element neon. Then the massive downturns of these things, experienced in the 2000s and beyond, were due to the negative side effects. I suppose it could be a meta-commentary on how corporations destroy societies with their meddling, too, if you wanted it to go a little bit deeper. Also, Eddie Izzard is clearly based off of Gordon Gekko from the 1987 movie Wall Street. Although I have not actually seen the movie, it's mostly just the name and him being an evil businessman slash sidekick to Olivia. And it's just another 80s reference at the end of the day. Now back to the story. So Miss Polly is once again forced to rely on an old tactic used by her predecessor, the announcer, many decades prior, but this time with a new team and new twist. She would be assembling another group of 9 mercenaries, however, they would be working for her, but secretly be infiltrating and working for Olivia Corps, as much like her uncles and father before her, Olivia would be playing both sides of various conflicts around the world to maximize her profits, and has a tax write-off, to fulfill her nefarious schemes of global domination. So basically Olivia will be the announcer, hence why the mercenaries, while actually working for Miss Pauline, will be taking orders from her, as for one, no way in hell could we ever remotely top Ellen McLean's announcer voice in 1,000,000 years, so why even attempt it? So the next best thing would be evil sexy business lady voice of Olivia, and with the mercenaries working for her, both teams would hear her voice as two. Splitting the announcers into between Miss Polly and Olivia seems kind of lame for one team, as I'm sure both teams would like the malevolent announcer, which is why the story is the way that it is, but they're still technically working for Manco in the end, just undercover. Back on topic. Miss Pauline calls upon her 2 most trusted advisors, Dr. Ludwig, the Team Fortress 2 medic, and Dale Conacher, the Team Fortress 2 engineer, to begin recruiting new mercenaries and implement their new super-duper top-secret project, the Augment Initiative, to assist them in battle.